United States Senator John Cornyn of Texas. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Morning, Hugh. Doing well, thanks.
I am carrying on in the middle of a radio show, an online discussion with Professor Brian Colt and others about the appropriateness of an impeachment trial of a private citizen. I will not be persuaded where Justice Story wasn't persuaded and where the framers weren't persuaded that they really meant this and they just left it out. I mean, has anyone come up and approached you with an argument yet that is even remotely plausible other than political?
Well, that's a new way to interpret the Constitution. It's what they left out, not what they put in. But no, I mean this is a made-up process. It's if this were the impeachment of a president, as you know, it required the Chief Justice to preside, and now we've got Senator Leahy, who will be the presiding officer. Presumably, he'll still act as a juror. Debbie Stabenow, the senator from Michigan, said, "Well, we're all victims," and then I assume we're all witnesses too. This is a Anglo-American jurisprudence turned on its head.
Well, I have played your quote today because I think it's important that condemnation of a pseudo-constitutional process not be confused with applause for what happened on January 6th. I believe the president was reckless that day. You said it, I said it in real time, that it was reckless and that he ought to step forward and call these 800 people who invaded the Congress off. But that doesn't change the Constitution. And do your colleagues across the aisle acknowledge this at all?
No, this is a political process. And, Hamilton said as much in Federalist 65, as much as we try to analogize this to a legal proceeding in a court of law. It's unique, but it's clear that this is part of a continuum. A lot of the same impeachment managers served on the Judiciary Committee that tried President Trump a year ago. And so this has just been a continuum ever since he was sworn into office. But again, I agree with you. You need to distinguish between making a serious mistake and going down there and giving a speech and encouraging the mob. But, that's the problem with mobs is that the lowest common denominator prevails. And here there were people who committed acts of violence, including in one case murder of a police officer. And we can't excuse that.
Now, in some cases, I believe the Democrats are looking for leverage in an attempt to tarnish the Republican brand for a very long time. Sure. In other cases, I think some people want vindication for having been anti-Trump before he was nominated, after he was nominated, before he was elected, during the transition, and every day of his presidency. They need vindication, and they need exoneration for what they did. And in other cases, and I want to ask you about this, misconduct related to President Trump remains out there. U.S. Attorney Durham, now Special Counsel Durham, is still at work. Do you think any of this has to do with changing the framing of what went on during the Trump presidency, not the post-presidency?
I do. I think anybody and everybody who supported President Trump's policies is being criticized as an enabler of the president. They're trying to analogize support for his policies with support for some of the self-destructive personality traits of the president. So, yeah, it's amazing to me that Joe Biden would squander his first 100 days of his administration with both trying to do reconciliation on a party line vote and then go back and try somebody who's no longer even president.
Well, they're going to get 5 votes, maybe part of those 5 will vote to acquit, even though after the evidence on due process grounds, we'll see. But it's a Perry Mason impeachment because we know the end of it. And now I'd like to go to, if I can, to the reconciliation, because that's going to go on and on and on. Does Joe Manchin intend to hold the line on silly stuff, in your opinion?
Well, the problem is that, everybody likes Joe, but Joe will vote with you when you don't need the vote. When you really, really need the vote, that's the question here, and he's got to hold the line on blowing up the Senate by eliminating the filibuster. And as you know, the arcane rules of budget reconciliation don't allow extraneous substantive legislation on a budget bill. That's the so-called Byrd rule, as you know. So we'll see whether he holds the line or not. He's going to be under tremendous pressure. I think he's enjoying the attention, but it's not all going to be fun.
Well, I don't believe he's going to break a explicit promise on the filibuster, but the Byrd rule is rather accordion-like, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or maybe it hasn't been, and the Democrats hope to make it an accordion. What is your sense on that, whether or not he or Senator Sinema or somebody else, maybe Angus King, recognizes that you don't want to gut the Byrd rule?
Well, that's a backdoor elimination of the filibuster. So it's not coming in the front door; it's the back door, because that's where you pass your agenda on the budget by eliminating this the Byrd rule that prohibits that by using a nuclear option. I forgive me for all the jargon, but you understand what I'm saying is that this is just another way to eliminate the filibuster and turn the Senate into a body that, just like the House, that can pass legislation with 51 votes, not the deliberative body that the founders intended, and that where we are required to gain consensus before we actually do something legislatively that will affect the lives of 330 million people.
Well, you see, I'm one of those people that attributes to the Democrats a little bit of strategery, and that they might be doing the impeachment trial in order to put out a lot of flack to obscure the Byrd rule discussion, because the Byrd rule does confuse a lot of people, and it is very important to get right. How soon after the circus will the real business get before you? The real business being the reconciliation bill.
Well, now that the budget resolution is passed, there are instructions that go to the various committees that now have to pass legislation to comply with those out of the committee, and then they'll be sent to the budget committee, put together, and then they'll come back to the floor. That's when we'll be really actually legislating, because the budget resolution isn't signed by the president; it's not law, and so that'll probably be March. Be my guess. But it's amazing to me that Joe Biden gave a really nice speech on January the 20th, talking about healing the nation and unity, and appears to be doing none of that during his early time in office.
Well, there needs to be a ground on which the GOP stands. I read a piece in the Washington Post about this. They have to start making substantive arguments. What do you think is the biggest flaw in the $1.9 trillion proposal, Senator?
Well, it's just not necessary. Only about 20% of the money that we appropriated in December has even been spent, Hugh. And you can't tell me that a $15 minimum wage is part of a COVID-19 relief package. And it's not as if the economy really needs more stimulus, because we're growing at a rate of about 4% a year, pretty good clip. In other words, what we've done before has helped, and the American economy, as resilient as it is coming back. But we do need targeted relief. We need to deploy the vaccine to make sure we get as many shots in arms as we possibly can. And we need to get kids safely back to school. And, of course, we're all watching the battle between the teachers' unions and parents about what's happening to our children, which is really tragic.
Now, there is also the problem that of the, I believe, total $5 trillion at the end of the Biden rescue package, it might be more. None of that money will have gone to defense, Senator Cornyn. So
No.
we will have done the most incredible thing ever. We will have increased the debt to $28 or $29 trillion, and we will not have bought a bullet. Am I right about that?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. This is nothing to do with national security or defense, and it's all about domestic spending and spending money we don't have, as you point out.
Well, I'm just astonished that is happening, that no one is standing up and saying we're spending $5 trillion. It's trillions for relief and not a penny for defense. It's like the reverse of what's ever happened before. Now, in Texas, I am curious, because I have Governor Abbott on later this week. In Texas, is the president's early approval waning, or is it growing stronger as he pursues his course of pure partisanship?
Well, I think, of course, President Biden didn't carry the day in Texas on November the 3rd. I think people want to give him the benefit of the doubt in his early days. But again, this contrast between what he says and what he actually does, I think, is beginning to sink in. And, of course, Texas has been the beacon of jobs and prosperity for the country. We've been taking a big hit, particularly in the oil and gas sector, which this administration wants to eliminate, along with the jobs that are created at a time when we really don't have the alternative energy sources that we hope to someday. In the meantime, thousands of people out of work, Keystone XL pipeline quashed, and that's just the beginning.
All right, last question, Senator. I'm going to go to this with Tom Cotton as well, coming up after you. If this is very in the weeds, if you have an objection or a question, does Senator Leahy get the advantage of having staff advise him on the law when you make that to him as the presiding officer?
Well, you raise a good question. You recall that Chief Justice Roberts refused to ask a question that was tendered to him, I believe, by Senator Paul. And I don't know whether Senator Leahy is going to exercise the same sort of discretion over and censor what senators can ask as in terms of questions. I do believe he'll consult with a parliamentarian who will advise him, but he's not obligated to follow the parliamentarian's advice. And that demonstrates to me a conflict of interest. You can't be a juror and a judge at the same time.
No, you can't. I'm just imagining, though, the Chief Justice is kind of in command of the law when he sits down, and I'm sure he studied. I've known him for a long time. I'm sure he studies up. Sure. Senator Leahy's been there a long time. I'm not sure he's up to date on these arcane arguments of constitutional law. Is someone acting as his clerk?
Not to my knowledge. I believe he'll just rely on the parliamentarian. So, this is, as much as we would like to think about this as being a legal proceeding, and that's the best analogy we can come up with, this is a political exercise from start to finish, and I don't expect Senator Leahy or any of the Senate Democrats to take leave their politics at the door. I think that's what's driving this.
That which gets rewarded gets repeated. I just think this is
Yep.
This is such a bad precedent, Senator, and I wish you well in persuading some of your colleagues. This is a terrible, terrible precedent to lay down. Thank you, Senator. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
I really